Welcome to today's social system mapping deep dive session for May 20th, 2024. Your hosts today, as usual, are me, Christine Capra, and Kara Martner on tech support and production. And I'm just, okay. So for today's agenda, we're going to start with some chat intros. We have a few people, we have a couple brand new people, and we have some regulars, and so we'll all have a chance to, in the chat, just briefly share what we're up to, why we're here. And then I'm going to talk about the landscape diagram. And this is not a this will be just sort of me sharing some recent thinking and about how we can relate the landscape diagram to social system mapping, both to the process and the outcomes of social system mapping. And then we might, and then we'll, Amy is part of the sense-making team, and Curtis, who's not here right now, the sense-making team and I will look together at the landscape diagram and come up with an activity for presenting it in a upcoming sense-making session. So this is sort of a developmental moment of just me sharing some things that have been coming to me lately. And then we'll have questions and answers. And for those of you who are brand new, we tend to keep, we'll have a extra half hour. So the formal, as formal as it will be, session will go for an hour to the top of the next hour. And then I'll stick around, and anybody else who wants to stick around will stay for an extra half hour that is unformatted and topic free, and just can dig into whatever questions or comments, whatever anyone has and would like to share. So, so that's our session, our plan for today. And let's go ahead, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And in the chat, if you would, this is an invitation. If you don't want to, you don't have to, but we invite you to share your name, pronoun, and location. And I see you're logging into a different device. Yep. Welcome, Karen from South Africa. And Mary. Karen, what time is it where you are? Feel free to say it out loud or put it in the chat, or I'm just curious. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you. Sorry, it's 5 p.m.
Okay. Sometimes I think far away, and I think, oh, it's the middle of the night. How could you be up so late?
No, I do often get sad because a lot of these types of sessions, get offered on different time zones, and I can never attend. But this particular one works very well for me, so thank you. I was just typing out to say apologies that I'm here twice. I do have to get in the car soon, and then I'll just be listening from my phone.
Okay, great. And what we're going to be doing is fairly visual, so it might be challenging. I don't want you to get in a car accident, but I'll let you manage your safety.
Thank you. I'll be careful.
Okay, and welcome, Govinda from Germany, and thanks for being with us. So then let's also share in the chat what's one primary network that you're part of or working with. We all I assume if you're thinking about social system mapping, you're part of it. There's some network in mind. If that's not true, that's fine. Then whatever's causing your interest would be welcome. But we do like to see what each other's working on and appreciate one another's work and focuses. So I see, Govinda, you have a map that you're working on.
Yeah, that's right. I'm trying to build an overview over the innovative part of the educational system here in the German-speaking area.
So education is, there seems to be a lot of education maps up lately. That's cool.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. And Evan, and your coalitions, your constellations. Next, if you in environmental work in South Africa. Cool. So, what brings you here today? Love to know. Big questions do you have, or big curiosity are you carrying? Glad to see that, Evan, that you're planning on diving back in more. We will be happy to have you. Great. Okay. And then, how did you hear about today's session? For those of you who are new to this space, we'd love to just learn how you came across us. And so for those of you who are just like wanting more and more and to understand social system mapping, wonderful. Glad to have you here. That's what this is about. Okay. All right. That's supports my initial thesis that by being an active member of a network weaving universe was the proper way for us to become exposed to the rest of the world. And so connections and more connections is what you're saying. So that's great. Great. And I'm getting a sense from each of you, the new people, that I mean, sometimes we have brand new people and they have like no idea of what social system mapping is, and they're totally green, and they're bringing with them what is this thing called social system mapping, and they want a very basic preliminary understanding before they can move forward. And just the way you each are answering or putting in the chat is making me feel like maybe that's not the case for you. Maybe it looks like you maybe done a little bit of your own, have your own hands-on experience or done a little bit of reading and research. And I'm asking that because we're not going to do that preliminary, what is social system mapping, that early what intro to what it is. And so if that's what you need, and it will be difficult to think with us about what we're going to talk about today if you don't have that, it would be good for us to surface that and see what we can do about it. So I'm asking people who haven't been with us before, if you feel like you have at least some bit of social system awareness of what social system mapping is, enough that you can be in a conversation that isn't going to answer that in a clear and direct way for you right now. So I'm going to say, to the degree that you're okay with moving forward without a introduction to social system mapping, give me a 5. And if you will jump off, if you don't get an introduction to social system mapping, just give me a 1. I don't know how to do my fingers, but. Evan, I think you mean the opposite. I know you know what a social system map is. Yes, okay, thanks. Okay, and then Govinda and Karen, I wasn't seeing your 5 and 5. Okay, great. And then Susan, just if you okay. My hunch was good. I feel more comfortable now. Thank you all for sharing that much information about your awareness of social system mapping. Okay, so this is going to be I'm going to talk about, so the landscape diagram. First, I'm going to just share for those of you, well, whether you are familiar with the landscape diagram or not, I'm going to share what it is in a very sort of high level way, some different variations of a landscape diagram first, and sort of how I've understood it and worked with it to the degree that I have in the past. And then I want to talk about some of, for those of you who don't know, I'm currently writing a chapter for a book about a second edition of a book about developmental evaluation. The chapter is about social system mapping, and it has been making me sort of like try to articulate a bunch of things that have been mostly internal and implicit in my mind. And as I was doing that last week, I started to have some insights about how the landscape diagram could help us prepare a group for social system mapping and pave the way for through maybe some of the challenges that often come up. So this is this is more about us as mappers thinking about the landscape diagram. And then when we turn it into something for the sense making session, it will be more about an activity that we could use with members of a community that we're mapping. But right now it's more of an exploration. So assuming that works for everyone, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen and jump in. And so first is just the overview of some diagrams. So this is the human systems dynamics landscape diagram, which was developed hypothetically somewhere in the late 80s or early 90s. And I think I'll just, yeah, before I I'll unpack this now. So has anyone seen this before? Who's familiar with the feels comfortable with it? I'm just going to go ahead. Okay. So this is about system, stability of systems. So if whatever the issue is, if it's a problem or a process or an organization, a system, however you're looking at it, we can try to discern, is it stable? Is it emergent? Is it evolving? Is it unstable? Is it falling apart and turning into chaos? Or is it just already been chaos and it never was together in the first place? And so how we think about that is if there's a lot of agreement about how to proceed or how this works, then if we're close to agreement, we're down here. If there's no agreement or if we're far from agreement, then this axis, then on the agreement axis, we're at the upper part of that axis. So if there's no agreement that a problem should be solved, we're far from agreement. If there's no agreement about how to solve the problem, we're far from agreement. So and the further from agreement we are, the less stable the system is going to be. And the more we have certainty, the more stable the system is going to be. And the less certainty we have, the less stable it's going to be. So what we're doing is we're just looking at this axis of agreement and certainty. And down here, if we're close to the lower left, we're in a stable system. If there's some of each of those, then we're in a system that is evolving, where depending on the conditions, new things are being created or can be emerged and can emerge, or it might be a system that's evolving and shifting, and we don't know where it's going to go. I mean, we don't know where it's going to go in any case, but it could turn out moving in directions that we like, or it could turn out to be moving in directions that we don't like. And then the further we get from agreement and from certainty, the more unstable the system is. So we can see this in political systems, we can see this in organizations, we can see this in our bodies. You know, the less we're, I'm not going to go through the body example because it just struck me as more than I'm capable of at the moment. And so, for instance, no, I'm going to stop here. Okay. So this is the HSD version of the landscape diagram. Another version. So all of these in my thinking, in my sort of poking into landscape diagrams this weekend, or last week, comes from some, you know, like 1950s, I think, book, academic book about systems. So different people at different points in time pulled out some of the thoughts of the writer of this book, and I don't have it in front of me. But this is, and then this is the Stacy matrix, which is essentially the same thing as the landscape diagram. The Stacy matrix is how I was first introduced to this concept. But again, it's the agreement and the certainty access. And the Stacy matrix does a little bit more than just say simple, emergent, chaotic. The labels are a little different, and there's a little bit more prescriptiveness about how to handle each of those contexts. I'm going to dig into this more in a minute, so don't be alarmed if I just don't give you a chance to read it, because I'm just trying to do a quick overview. And then, so in both of these, clearly, there's this movement from stable down here at the lower left to unstable at the upper right, regardless of what else you see in the graph. That's what's going on. And then we have Dave Snowden's Canavan framework, which is very similar, except that he lays it out a little differently. So he's got clear down here. This is a simple system, and then he's got complicated, and then he's got complex, and then he's got chaotic. So he's doing a circle, and he sort of does it in a somewhat backwards way from that linear line that other people are using. And one of the reasons that I just like to refer to the Canavan framework is because part of the circularity that he's pulling out, part of what he's pulling out with the circularity is this concept that you can go, so he has a lot of thoughts about how you move from a chaotic to a complex to a complicated to a clear system, if like going from in this reverse direction. What's needed there, and I'm going to come back to that. But he also, and they all have thoughts about what's needed to move from one to the other. His just includes this sense that, or this understanding that clear, you can push so hard to clarity. You can do all the things, and you can get back to this sort of simple or clear or stable system, and make it so become so rigid about it that you actually push it over this is a little cliff. He's got other pictures where that's a cliff, and I'm going to just go to this one. So it looks more like there's a little bit of a cliff there, and you can push it into chaotic. So he has this like circular understanding that it's not like, there's clear, and then we go up to chaotic, and it just always moves in that direction, or like from between those two poles, but that you can sort of flip it over and that they come back together. And so that's just a little teeny interesting piece that I'm just pointing to without analyzing at the moment. And so I came across, as I said, a version of this one. I don't know, in 2010 or somewhere along in there, and found it useful. It wasn't this version. I can't find the version that I originally was looking at, but found it useful in beginning to think about approaches to solving problems using a network approach. Like usually we're not building networks to solve simple problems that are in stable contexts. We're usually building networks to solve complex or at least complicated problems. And being able to think about where we are and understand the difference between a simple system and a complex system and what's needed in those systems just seemed like a really good, really useful thing to think about. So I, in 2014, took the Stacy matrix of conditions. This is before I had seen the landscape diagram of Glenda's. I took what I found in one version of the Stacy matrix of system conditions and overlaid into it also a bunch of variations on the Canavan framework to sort of, which anybody who knows me would say, of course she did. It's messy, it's dense, it's not easy to read. And so of course that's what Christine would do because that's how I am. But what I was trying to do was sort of create a cheat sheet of like all the ways to, not all the ways, because there's a lot more than this, but ways of the people are thinking about what's good and like what are the characteristics and what's needed in each of these different kinds of conditions. So when we're in a simple system, our best practices are to just see what's going on, respond to it, and categorize. So we can make rules, we can do top down, we can plan and control, we can make recipes. Cause and effect are obvious, and the system is stable. So that sort of behavior, that sort of approach, not only works, but is the most efficient in those kind of contexts. Is to just, write a recipe or create a list of 10 steps, and not spend a whole lot of energy treating it like it needs to be more complicated than it is. So often Amy's the one who's telling me, here's a place where it could be simpler. Here's a place where we don't need it to be so complex. And then I'm telling Amy, yeah, but here's a place where we do need to be complex. So we're sort of, balancing each other out in this way. But so, and if it's socially complicated, then it really building relationships is key to being able to move forward. Like you won't get to agreement. You won't get to, people saying, yes, that's a problem, we can fix it, or yes, this is a good way to fix it, without building trust and building and creating common ground. So that is key in a socially complicated condition. I'm just going to point out that this version of the Stacy matrix that I started with differentiates, unlike this one doesn't differentiate between socially complicated and technically complicated. It just treats them as if they're the same thing. This one doesn't expressly do that either. And that's what I really liked about the version that I was working with, was the acknowledgement that socially complicated and technically complicated are very different conditions, and they require different interventions in order to help the system become more of what we want it to be. So a socially complicated system is turbulent. We see that all the time these days. And a technically complicated system is unstable. I like to think of software as technically complicated, and it works until it doesn't. But one little thing change over here can make changes over there in a way that has nothing to do with people and people's reactions to each other. So and then these pieces here, this like these come from Dave Snowden. Dave Snowden has this like, here's what sort of like a sequence of ways of responding: sensing, analyzing oneself or other, and responding, or sensing, analyzing the system, and then responding, versus probing, sensing, responding, versus acting, sensing, responding. So in each of these, there's just sort of a different sequence of what is useful. And so in this zone, where we're looking for, so we're trying to, I'm not I'm sorry. I need to slow my head down. I apologize. Not apologize, but I'm just acknowledging that I was very human last week and didn't put as much time into preparing for this as I intended to, and it's all deeply in my head. So I'm not worried about not having stuff to say, but it's rearranging itself as I'm talking, and so I'm need to slow down and listen to my sensing better. Okay, so this is my version of the Stacy matrix, which sometimes when I've used it, I've had that as a little sort of cheat sheet to help me think, okay, where are we in, what is going on, or as a way of helping people learn that depending on the conditions of the system that we're talking about or developing or addressing or trying to shift, we need to understand where we are first, and then from there we can begin to know how to proceed. And so that's my version. This is Glenda's version, which is very much more simple and easy to read. And Kara can put, if you would put okay, you did. So Kara put a link to the basic landscape diagram link resource in the Human Systems Dynamics website. There's probably a lot more. Glenda will take a model and she'll approach it from different angles. And so there will be other articles or other posts in the resources section of the HSD website that I encourage you to look into. And I'm going to pause here and see if there's any sort of key clarifying questions around what I've shown so far. And after we talk through the clarifying questions, I want to talk about sort of how I've started to envision using this with networks recently. So just sort of the recent sort of insights that I've had. So I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment and just see if there's clarifying questions. I don't want to amplify or dig or go too deep, but I want to make sure that everyone can move forward and there isn't any burning thing that is like, I can't do this with you unless I have an answer to this particular question. So I'm not seeing clarifying questions, not seeing hands or, okay. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just a slow typist.
No,
This
I'm
is
sorry. Go
Susan.
ahead. Mhm.
Can you look at the zone of complexity? And I'm trying to understand emergent practices versus chaos in that portion of the diagram.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen again. That's a good question. And I'm going to see if can you say more about what the question in your mind is?
In that portion of the quadrant, it looks to me like emergent practices and chaos exist within a continuum as well. And I'm just trying to understand that. Is that what's being reflected?
Yeah, that the further we are from agreement and certainty, the closer we are to chaos.
Okay.
And so this zone of complexity is in here, and it sort of starts when we're, sort of halfway to certainty and halfway away from certainty and halfway away from agreement. So there's still some agreement or certainty, but it's volatile enough or unstable enough that this is where new things can emerge and also where things can fall apart, but it's not chaos yet.
Okay, so probe, sense, respond fit in my head for emergent practices. Is this diagram depicting act, sense, respond as appropriate, useful steps in a chaotic system?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're in chaos, let's say you're in a landslide, in an avalanche or in a huge flood, you don't have time to do anything but grab the nearest tree branch or do, like your first thing is to protect life, just whatever's closest, and to not is just do what's needed to get out of the way. So acting as a first step, and then start sensing, and then start responding.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Okay, great. That was a great question. Okay, so I'll just use this Glenda's, and so what I was realizing as I was doing this writing last week was that here are some of the challenges. I'm going to share some of the challenges that have come up for me in the many, many social system maps I've made in working with the community to define, to co-create the content of a social system map, to co-create the processes around getting everybody in the map and making the map an ongoing iterative thing as opposed to a one-time shot, and keeping the map, socializing the map and getting it used by the community. All of these social challenges that I've experienced with it. So I'm going to talk about the social challenges that I've experienced with social system mapping, and how this came to me. Because the truth is, back in the day when I made that version, this version, I used it a few times, and I didn't quite know how to bring that into, how to use it in a project. So it was in the back of my mind, and I'm always thinking about it, but I didn't like share it with a community and do activities to help them think about it. Did it a couple times at first, and it was really energizing for everybody. And something just shifted in my thinking, and I stopped doing that. And so what happened last week is, now I'm going to start doing that again. And now I have a deeper insight into why it's necessary and how to use it. So one of the things that a starting issue that I notice is that a lot of people, they'll be making a social system map. And so there's some kind of implied network that is either beginning or is already well developed that they're trying to map. And often people don't, and so this map will be generally around some kind of system, like an education system or some kind of environmental interventions or solutions or whatever. And the predominant people in the network are used to stable systems and prefer, oh, here's a backup thing I'm going to do before I go into that. One of the ways Glenda uses this is she will have like put tape on a floor. This is in a live setting, and have people stand in the diagram where they feel most comfortable. Say like, okay, where are you, what, in what kind of a system, what kind of a context do you prefer? Do you feel like able to handle or want to hang out in? And then we'll, we'll spread ourselves out, and then we'll see right away. Like, I'm always pretty much up here. I used to always be up here. I think I'm be more down here nowadays as I get older and get tired of chaos. But some people just naturally feel really comfortable in emergent contexts, and most people don't. Most people prefer to be in stable contexts. And so, first of all, identifying where I'm comfortable seems like a really good starting point, because then you'll have some self-awareness. We all have some self-awareness of, for instance, because I'm comfortable in unstable situations, I tend to create instability. I can create chaos. I create messes. And so that's sometimes really useful and necessary, and sometimes it's just a pain in the butt. Sometimes it's just like, Christine, okay, enough chaos, like it's not healthy anymore. And so having some self-awareness about our own tendencies and then saying, okay, well, yeah, I see. So, and I'm never going to become like a master at the stability corner. So it's good for me to hang out with people who are more competent and creative and useful in the stable side of things, because then we can balance each other out. So even just identifying one's own preferences and tendencies, and that also helps us then start to see how we have different mindsets, how our comfort levels with systems creates certain mental habits. So right there is a great place to start. And then, so I did this activity with a group where they had a vision and they had a, purpose, whatever. And I asked them, I put a big paper with this diagram and explained it to them and asked them to go and put a Post-it note where they thought the system that they were trying to change was. Like, is this a stable system you're trying to change? Is it emergent? Is it unstable? And interestingly, most people thought that they were changing a stable system from, if they were there in their minds, they were going to change a stable system from a stable system to a better stable system. And some people thought that it was emergent system. And then another handful of people said that, no, this whole system that we're talking about, there's like next to no agreement and there's next to no certainty about how to move forward. And so it's an unstable system. And so we sat down, and that was, we had a conversation for the rest of the hour, I think, about people's perspectives and what kind of a system they thought they were working with. And that helped them understand the ways the assumptions they were making about how to move forward. And it helped them all sort of get more on the same page about systems thinking and what was needed. So I think I've been thinking about how to incorporate both of those steps into a process with my clients now going forward, so that we start, because what I see is one of the challenges I see is that we start from people thinking that we're in a stable system and we're going to move to a better stable system, and without any insight into how that actually happens and how and what's actually possible. So getting people on the same page about the conditions in the system that they're trying to change is beginning to feel to me like really important, because it would a lot of the conversations we have are just sort of spinning around these really simple assumptions that are problematic. And often with clients, no one sees that they're problematic except for me. And then finally I have to say, okay, but it sounds like we need to think of this differently. And then people will go, oh yeah. And then, okay, we're good. But there isn't enough shared already thinking about this that people can sort of pull themselves in a new way of thinking. So there's that. And then I was realizing that people in terms of the project itself, not in terms of the system that they're trying to change, but in terms of the project itself, people will approach it as if it's a stable thing. Like we can just sort of make a list and everyone will check off, and then we can move forward, and then we're going to have a 10-step plan. And that is actually, in my experience, it's like when we start a map, we're sort of in this emergent space, and then it gets even less stable. We start to discover people aren't going to like this language, or there's problems with that, or whatever, and it gets a little more unstable. And the goal is to get down, for the map itself, to get down to a more stable environment, but it doesn't go from stable to stable. It goes from emergent to more complex, and then starts to pull over time as people get more and more comfortable with what they're doing. It starts to move towards a stable system, but it doesn't just go. There's a whole nother piece in here that feels very connected to it, which has to do with change in systems and how change happens. But I see that I'm talking a lot, and we have 15 minutes left, and I think that I don't want to go into the change things, but and I feel like there was, let me just check some. So part of what I'm thinking is that if people's capacity to make sense of a map is dependent somewhat on their understanding of what the map is representing. And if they're, oh, here's a way of saying this that is coming back to me. Hang on. So this is from Dave Snowden's, oh, where'd it go? Oops. Oh yeah, I'm still in here. Okay, wrong. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a moment. Okay, so if I go back to I'm just gonna share this for a moment. So if I go to the Snowden's framework, he's got this area here called aporetic, which comes from the Greek word aporia, which translates to impasse or perplexity. And he likes to think of this as sort of a threshold or a liminal space. And what he says about that is that traditional problem solving methods probably won't work, and that it requires, and he emphasizes this, deliberate exploration and creative thinking to move towards a more ordered domain. So when you're going from chaotic to complex, or from complex to complicated, or from complicated to clear, if you're trying to go in that direction to more stability, there has to be deliberate exploration. And I feel like this is the piece that people approach a social system map without an understanding of, and I'm not saying everybody, but often people will sort of say, what will it teach me? What will it show me? What do I do with it? And the answer is a lot of deliberate exploration. But people don't have a sense of, aren't taught in our schools, et cetera, how to do that deliberate exploration. And so that's the piece that I feel like is just, I'm trying to find a way to aim us towards supporting a mindset that is both capable of doing that deliberate exploration and understands the need for doing that deliberate exploration, and appreciates doing that in a collective way with the kind of information that we can get from a map, and that requires people to start to think about, oh, it is complex what we're trying to do, and that it's not gonna work for us to treat this like a recipe. And we do need to do this exploration. Like, people will just think, okay, I know what to do in my head, now we're just going to do this, and someone will say that, and then we'll all run off. But if we're not doing this deliberate exploration as part of that process or upfront, we often don't, we just keep recreating the problem, or we just keep making new problems, or just nothing changes. And so it's that piece of getting to that point of being able to do that deliberate exploration and valuing it that was coming to me, is I need to find a way of imparting that in a non-overwhelming way, that people can step into, that we can take it a step at a time, and we can say, okay, here's what we're going to need to do, and here's why, and let's have a conversation about, how we're seeing this, so that they're together moving into that capacity. So that's what I was thinking about. And I'm going to stop talking and just give people a chance. And Evan had to jump off. So Would love anybody to just unmute and share what they're thinking, or deepen or not deepen, ask questions. And especially new people, I appreciate your, that was maybe a classic Christine ramble. And, and I appreciate your sticking around for it. And I'm just really curious how, whether it's the content or just the approach or whatever's coming up for you. It doesn't need to sound smart, because that's not a priority here. Yeah. And Mary, I see you unmuted, and I'll come back to you in a moment, but I just would like to hear from Govinda or whomever of the other three new people first.
Okay. Then I try to share my idea. I wanted to use social system mapping to measure the impact that I have as a networker with creating events. So I'm creating events to connect the, I don't know how to say it in English, but probably it's imago cells. So if there's a transformation from a caterpillar to a butterfly, then there's a cocoon, and in the cocoon there is liquidity, and there are imago cells. So cells who can already imagine to be a butterfly. And this is what I try to find within the educational system. So and then connect them. Once with educational dinners, then with an educational picnic and a cooperathon. So cooperations, hackathon, and a podcast and stuff like this. And I have little bubbles, and I would like to ask them up front. So before they meet, who of the others that will attend, then they already know, and who they gonna know better or trust more or collaborate with like a month and or a year later. And I found sumApp, and I think it's a great tool, and it's still a bit confusing to me. And thanks a lot for giving me the chance to see people behind this, because as a networker, connecting to people is always easy to me, and connecting to names or dots or whatever is a bit harder. But yeah, I tried to do this anyways, and I already had a community of practice with others who are working with Kumu. And we found us pretty smart that we've figured out this Wortspiel. I don't know in English. Anyways, and yeah, so what we had back then in this community of practice was that we just had our own maps that we are working on, and then we just met, and once, of course, we talked about each other, and then we talked about our maps. And is it possible to just come here with a map and talk with you about the map?
Depending on the I would have you follow up with Kara and tell her where the data is coming from. So I'll be really explicit. A social system map, you can make all kinds of maps in Kumu, and you can source your data from anywhere, and those aren't necessarily social system maps. So a social system map is data gathered with sumApp, which is designed for this explicit purpose, to get at people's relationships. And then, so the data is gathered with sumApp and then put into Kumu. And that loop of the pair of them is a social system map in our definition. So if it's a social system map, then we could do a deep dive of just you showing the map, if you're willing to let other people be observe and ask questions at the end. Yeah, we could do that. If that would be helpful for you, and if that's a social, if you're talking about, if you have a social system map to share. Yeah.
I hope so. Not today, of course, because it's like 5 more minutes. But yeah, Kara, maybe we can just meet and I can show you what I've got, and you can tell me what I need to do that it's a social system map in your point of view.
Okay. And
Thanks.
I'll let you, so there's two ways we can do this is possible. One is if someone has a social system map that they've already created that has people in it and people engaging with it, then you can share that in what we call an on-ramp session, which is an introductory session. And if it's a map that you're conceptualizing, that you are trying to start and you're stuck with, or if it's like a context that's really different from everybody else's, and so you'd like some thought partnering advice, then we would do a deep dive, which would be sort of an interview between you and me helping you think through your challenges with other people listening in. So one is a presentation of your map, and one is an exploration of a thought partnering about the map without sharing the map. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes, it does. And I think presenting could be possible in winter.
Okay, cool. We love to see everybody's maps. When people make maps, we love to see them. So, Susan, I'm noticing that you had would stable also mean more effective then? Well, oh, are you there? Yeah.
Hi.
I want to respond to that, which is, not necessarily. A lot of, yeah, I think you know the answer to that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just, in terms of feedback and where I'm thinking right now, this has been really useful for me to have you present the different landscape models, but particularly your 2014 mashup version of it. And your most recent ramble has also been really helpful, simply because the system that we are working with is to try to improve social service navigation and care coordination across health, education, and social service sectors on a regional level. It is very complex, and the challenge for me is we are using 3 different models of community engagement. We are using community-based participatory action research, community development, and liberatory design. Those resonate really well with the people who have struggled to access necessary resources, the people most impacted by inadequate systems. They do not resonate nearly so well with our technical folks. And I tend to sit in the middle as an interpreter. And I think my sweet spot would be in that emergent space somewhere along that line. I have been trying to advocate that this might be a good process for us to work on collectively. I think it would be picked up and understood much more quickly by those who have suffered as a result of systems than it is for those who are used to creating technical systems that are linear in their design and then they break. My challenge is that I'm having a hard time pitching this, especially when we have multiple funders involved who are reluctant to provide the length of time it takes for relationship formation. And from my perspective, not taking that time will undermine future progress. So that's kind of where I am.
Well, I applaud your insight and your holding of all of this and understanding of the challenges and desire to work with them. And would love, I mean, I have an intuition that the landscape diagram can help do the convincing. I have not tried it. I myself have a sort of a an allergy to convincing people, so I don't have a lot of experience with that. Somehow people show up convinced, and I'm grateful that they do, but or 80% convinced and they just need to ask some questions to put them over the edge. So I'm not a super great resource on how to do that, but I sense that, like I said, that the diagram could help. And I would love if you try that, if you would bring your learning back to us. If, it could be like, we do a deep dive and I just interview you about how you did it and people get to ask questions. Whether it's a success or a failure, in either case, it's valuable. You'll have learned something. So anyway, that's an invitation to future, to circling back with
Okay.
the challenge you just shared. And maybe, if you want to think through an approach, and if the timing were to work for you, we could do a deep dive of just looking at your approach together and getting a crowd-sourced set of insights into it. I mean, certainly I would have thoughts, and I'm sure other people in the community would have some thoughts as well. That might be more work than you want to, that might not be super effective for you, but it might be. So I'm just throwing out ideas and saying, see if anything lands for you.
Okay, and yeah, and I know we're at time here. I know you felt like you rambled, and I think probably that's valid, but I also gained from it, so thank you.
Good. Thank you for that feedback. So we have it is at the hour, and we have a little goodbye ritual for those of you who aren't familiar with it. The invitation is to just unmute. And if you need to jump off right now, we're just going to give each other our well wishes and blessings for the rest of the day, and then go ahead and jump off. And if you wanted to stick around for the next half hour, just don't jump off when we're all done. But I'm going to count down. So let's all unmute if you want to do this. And then 3, 2, 1. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
Bye-bye.
Hope to see
Bye.
you all on a Monday.
Bye.
Bye.